long.
So you just kind of walked up here silently towards
I was shopping.
Oh, and I discouraged him. What an idiot I am. So, one thing I would like to do, since I am the store Instagrammer and not actually being rude reading my email while we're doing the program, would all of you hold up your books so I can take a photo? Terrific. Yay. All right. Ready? Smile. Great. Would you like to stand in the middle now that you sat down? I'm sorry.
That was a pretty good picture out there.
I beg your pardon. All right. So now you can stand and look. I should get Liz in this picture. Let me see if I can do that. Oh, here. You want to go? Yeah, be embarrassing. Okay, here we go. Great. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Liz.
That's a good idea you did there.
You know, we are so cutting edge. Think of all the things you've learned in the last half hour.
That's very true back there. I did learn a lot back there. That's right.
So Steve and I were reminiscing a little bit earlier. He was here for his very first book, 18. This is book 1814 of the Cotton Malone series. But Steve was actually here for the Amber Room way back in the day. What year was it?
Right there. 2003.
Okay.
Right, sat right there, and the little table. The little table's gone.
It's a different table
Different
now.
table, yeah.
We upgraded the furniture.
And I sat right there, and what do we have, about 15 people, I think.
I told him that's a huge crowd for a first novel.
Oh, I
Actually,
was
it
thrilled
great.
to have 15, 20 people at that. That was great.
And we talked about the Amber Room, which is absolutely wonderful. For those of you who think that the Amber Room is actually the Amber Room in the Catherine's Palace outside St. Petersburg, it's not. It's a reproduction, it's a fake, and we don't know whatever, not a fake, but a reproduction. We really don't know what happened to the Amber Room, but you had sort of a thought.
Most likely it was destroyed. Two journalists who worked for the London Times spent many years studying it, and they got access to the Russian archives after the fall of the Soviet Union, and they most likely what happened was the room was taken to Königsberg. It was on display there. The Germans were trying to box it up and get it out of there before the Russians got there. They didn't get it out in time. The Russians bombed Königsberg Castle. They just obliterated it. And amber goes from solid to gas at 220 degrees. So at 220, it's gone. It's gas. And that's what happened. Because the heat of that explosion was well over 2,000 degrees because it melted stone in the castle. And there was a reports in the days after of a strong odor of perfume all over Königsberg for days. Amber, of course, when burned, is very aromatic and very strong. So most likely the Russians concluded they blew it up, but they didn't tell anybody. They want anybody to feel sorry for them because they lost their great treasure and all that kind of stuff. So most likely they destroyed it themselves.
Wow, that's an interesting theory. So if you go to St. Petersburg, pop for the extra money and go at night to see the Amber Room. It's totally different in candlelight, and it's absolutely beautiful, and they usually have a concert. And also, there are not 4 million tourists trying to beat down the door to get inside. So it's by far the best thing to go. But here we are, after 5 books exploring constitutional issues here in America. You are back overseas with Cotton Malone.
And that's where he'll stay for a while. I did 9 Cotton Malone books overseas. And then I had these constitutional books I wanted to do. These things in the Constitution made great thrillers, and I wanted to build the American audience a little bit more, and so we focused on those for 5 books. It worked. We built the audience. We did good, but I want to get back to where I started, and that was overseas. So Cotton's back there, and he'll stay there now for a long time, at least 6 or 7 books at least, maybe more. I have several adventures. I've been holding them for years. I just haven't done them because I did the constitutional book. So I'll go back. He'll stay over there. This book harkens back to Templar. It's a harken back to the Templar legacy in that it deals with another warrior monk organization, the only one that survived to today. The others are all gone. The Knights of Malta are still here, 900 years old. And they're headquartered in Rome, and they have a presence in Malta, and they're a fascinating organization. So I just resurrected something inside them that used to exist. It's not there anymore, but it was there at one time, and I brought it back and made it a little more active and got them a little more interesting.
So what's the origins of the Knights of Malta?
They were the Knights Hospitallers. They were started, as it said, they created hospices, which are hospitals, for the pilgrims coming to the Holy Land. And if you got hurt, if you got sick, they took care of you. Then they evolved into being warrior monks. They did their hospital services, but they also fought. And then they stayed in the Holy Land till they were tossed out. They went to Cyprus, they were thrown out. They went to Rhodes, they were thrown out. Then they were given the island of Malta in 1520, 1530 by the Holy Roman Emperor. He leased them the island in return for a falcon every year, one falcon. They give him one, that was the lease payment that they would make. That was not gratuitous on his part. They were put there as a defense to prevent the Turks from coming in the back door and up into Europe, because Malta sits halfway between Europe and Africa, and it's in a perfect location. You control Malta, you control the Mediterranean. They wanted the Knights to protect it. And sure enough, in 1565, the Turks laid siege to Malta. Here they come. And they wanted it bad. And a small group of knights, about 400 knights, held off 10,000 Turks and held the island.
It's really one of the greatest sea stories of all time, isn't it?
Oh, it'd make a fantastic movie, because there were horrible things on both sides that went on during the siege, and it was back and forth, and they finally beat them down. Europe wouldn't come to help them. They were basically on their own, and they held them off and kept the island.
So that actually went on in World War II as well. As you pointed out, Malta actually was bombed more often than London by the Germans. And because it was key to the British holding in the Mediterranean, Suez, Gibraltar, Malta, there have been a number of other books written about it, but none with this particular approach that you've taken.
Well, I wanted to explore that, the Mussolini. The book opens. Has anyone read it yet? A little bit. Yeah, of course you have. Evil eye right here. She's read it. But it opens with an interesting thing dealing with Mussolini and Churchill. And the letters that went on between Mussolini and Churchill that are legendary. No one knows they exist. There's talk that they exist. There's a lot of discussion about it. But to this day, no one really knows. Churchill, after the war, went and vacationed in Lake Como for 3 months, which is a weird place to vacation. Some say he was there to look for the letters. Some say Mussolini brought them north with him when he was trying to escape Italy into Switzerland, and they were lost in the satchels that he had with him. Nobody knows, which is perfect for me, because I can do whatever I want to with it. You won't write me an email and tell me how stupid I am, that I'm wrong, because nobody knows. But what happened was the letter supposedly, Churchill was negotiating to give Malta to Italy in return for Italy not coming into the war. Well, it fell through. All that fell through, and of course, Malta was laid siege to. Thousands died. It would have been extremely embarrassing to Churchill for those letters to have surfaced after the war. And so I just started it off because it connected to Malta perfectly, and then it led into the rest of the story of where it takes place.
So part of the book takes place you start in Lake Como, right? And it's an opening scene about what happened to Mussolini and his mistress, Clara Petacci, which was an execution, essentially.
Yeah, we saw the site where they were killed. It's just an entrance to a villa. It's 2 stone walls and a gate, and there's fresh flowers there. There are fresh flowers there put every week. Nobody knows where they come from, but they're there. For Mussolini. I mean, guy's been dead 75 years. He was a brutal dictator who murdered hundreds of thousands of people, but people still bring fresh flowers to where he was executed. It's very odd. And they were there the day we were there. There was a wreath there.
Actually, there's a fair amount of nostalgia for the fascists, and we were in Romania and
it's kind of
Bulgaria.
like having nostalgia for cancer.
Well,
there
was a lot of nostalgia for the
I know what you're talking. I know what you're saying. You're exactly.
It's hard to imagine, but it's true.
His grave site is visited every year, and they have a big parade every year.
Yeah.
And so you're exactly right. There are people who still think back on that and don't realize that he was a brutal dictator who murdered hundreds of thousands of people. And we were there. We traced that route. It's really cool. If you've never done it, it's a great place to go to Lake Como and to trace that route. And you can see all that area up there where he was caught, where he was taken, and where he was shot. Then they hung him upside down, the famous photo, but that was in Milan. They took him back to Milan to do that. So we started there, and then it goes to Rome, and then he goes to Malta, then back to Rome. And because a pope is dead, a conclave has been called, but a cardinal has left Rome to go to Malta in search of a 4th century document from Constantine the Great. And Cotton gets caught up in all that. And this is not a book about a secret that destroys the Catholic Church. It's not that at all. It's just the opposite of that. Every single character in this novel wants the Catholic Church to stay exactly like it is. They do not want to destroy anything. So it's a very different. But it is a religion. It has a religion. So what? I did 3 religion books: Templar, Alexandria, and Third Secret. I had a 4th one in my brain. I didn't do it because it's been done to death. I waited to see if anyone would touch this particular subject of religion. No one's ever touched it, so I went there. Because it's pretty broad and it's somewhat controversial. So I wanted to touch on it and to deal with it, and no one has dealt with it. So since it was fresh, I went there.
Why not?
Yeah.
Explore it. So your cardinal, the one that's absent, is actually Maltese.
He is, and
which gives you a reason to go to Malta.
Puts in there, and there's a reason why Malta. Have you been to Malta? It's a great place. It's a great place. If you want to take a great vacation, go to Malta. It's a living history museum. It's 12 miles long, 6 miles wide. It's a small little island. Valletta's like walking back in the 16th century. The co-cathedral is the church that's there in Valletta is the most beautiful church in the world. If you don't believe me, go home, Google it, look at the pictures. It's spectacular, particularly the floor. Look at the floor. The floor is 400 marble tombs made of all of marble. Now, when you look at those floors, you're going to think that's painted. It's not. It's all stone. And they're not fake tombs. There's people in every one of those tombs. And those tombs figure into the treasure hunt. And they all factor in. So this book's going to give you a pretty good travel log of Malta. So hopefully it'll get you where you want to go and see it all. We enjoyed it. I love it.
You really liked Malta.
I did love Malta. I liked it a lot. It's a great place. And we roamed around there for 10 days. One trip. We've been there twice.
With our kids, though.
I'm so sorry for you.
Yeah.
Right.
No, see, with our kids.
Well, we had children. Yeah, we had the children with us, but I was researching the book as we were going, and we just went all over that place and looked at everything. It was just it goes all the way back to prehistoric times, and there are megalithic sites there, and there's all kinds of stuff there. People have occupied that rock for a long time.
So from Malta, you inevitably end up in Rome, since that's where the Vatican is. Distinguish for us the Vatican versus the Holy See, because that also plays a role in
And I wanted the book to distinguish that. The Vatican is the physical place. It was set by the 1929 Lateran Treaty. It made it an independent country. It's the physical location. The Holy See is the government that governs that location. And the Holy See, there's nothing magical about it. It's run by men. It's adapted by men. It's all done by men. And it's full of corruption. It really is. And I'm not making that up. The novel deals with some interesting waste, fraud, and abuse in the Holy See that is true. It's actually accurate. And I was shocked to read that. I didn't realize how bad it was there.
Well, there's a huge issue of accountability.
Yeah, they don't have any.
That's my
It's zero.
right?
It's zero. Now, most people think the Pope rules absolute, the Catholic Church, his word is law. That is, sorry, nice idea. It doesn't work that way. The Curia runs the Catholic Church, and that is the organization of the Holy See. Popes have tried and tried and tried to change it, modify it, adapt, whatever, they can't. Corruption is institutionalized there.
And there is so much money flowing in. Haven't you mentioned the fact that there are like 2 sets of books?
They keep 2 sets of books. Everybody keeps 2 sets of books, which is a little suspect right off the bat, right? Pope Francis set up a commission to go in and actually audit all of them. They couldn't. They couldn't get the books. There's no books to get. There's no way to get it. They would give them the fake books. There was no way to do anything. The cardinals are not afraid of anything. They have no fear of anything, because if you get rid of one, another one comes in. It's just the same thing. It never stops. It's an institutionalized corruption because there's no accountability in any way, and there's no penalty if you mess up, except you just get removed and someone else comes in. And I never realized how bad it was. There's a book that's referenced in the writer's note. A journalist spent many years studying this, and his book is very interesting and when you read it, you know, he did a lot of research, a lot of interviews, a lot of everything to determine, and it's amazing the level of abuse. It's hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars.
There's an actual crime, some of you may remember it, or it was a suicide of one of the financial connected to the Vatican. Remember he
That's
hung
Vatican
himself
Bank.
off the bridge in Rome. I can't remember which one, but so there have been external signs of this for.
That was back in '78 with the Vatican Bank when it was
Right.
corrupt. To this day, they actually changed the name of it. They don't call it the Vatican Bank anymore, but it's still there with the same problems. The same problems. It hasn't gone anywhere. But the Catholic Church, in essence, according to the journalist who wrote the novel, is essentially broke. It's basically it's broke. It just does. They spend more than they take in.
And they have lots of lawsuits and other things to contend with at the moment, which is making it an even more difficult project. But anyway, your point is not so much the corruption, but rather the conclave and what is
the conclave
going on.
figures into it, and then the Knights of Malta figure into it, and it all comes together. But the document from the 4th century is my creation. I created it, but what's in the document is true. So that's the interesting thing. The information that's in the document is true information. It's just I created my own. I brought it all together. It's kind of like my Gospel of Simon that I had in the Templar Legacy. You know, that's my gospel. I made it up. You know, but what I put in there was a thesis put forward not by me but by others, and I adapted it to put it in there. And here I did the same thing with the Constantine's gift.
So in the spirit of a true thriller, we have competing intelligence agencies at play here, one of which is the Vatican. So tell us about the entity.
But amazingly, the Catholic Church has its own spy organization, and most people don't know this. It was created in the 16th century to kill Elizabeth I, the Queen of England. She was Protestant queen. They wanted to get rid of her, bring Catholicism back to England, so they created a spy organization, basically sent it over to England to take her out. They were not able to do that, though unfortunately it didn't work out so well. But that spy organization stayed in place, and it is still there today. It is the oldest intelligence organization in the world. It is regarded today as one of the finest intelligence organizations in the world. It has hundreds of thousands of eyes and ears all over the world, and priests and bishops and cardinals and laymen who report in constantly. It's called the entity today. The Catholic Church will not acknowledge that it exists. It's headed by a single cardinal. They will not acknowledge who that is. There's a book on it. There's 2 books on it, one of which is referenced in the writer's note if you want to read about it, where you can read. A guy spent a lot of time looking at this and studying its history all the way through. But it's just fascinating that a church needs a spy organization. You know, when you think about it for a minute, why do you need a spy organization? You know, but they do, and they were involved in quite a few things over the centuries. A lot.
So what's Cotton's role in all this? He's coming in from the U.S. team.
He gets caught up in it. He's doing a favor again. He's just all the time. He gives a favor. Poor guy just tries to help somebody out. But money. He works for money now. I mean, he's got to pay the bills basically. So they offered him some.
His bookstore is not self-supporting.
They do okay, but he likes his money. You know? And he likes his side jobs. It pays him very well, and he doesn't like to admit it, but he likes the rush too. He enjoys what he's doing. He won't say that, but he does. And so he's just doing a simple errand that turns into something quite different. And then it begins to escalate, and as it escalates, Stephanie asks him, will you keep going forward? And he keeps. And then Luke Daniels comes into play. And this is a relationship book between Luke and Cotton. We're developing their relationship in this novel. So Luke is changing. He's getting a little more seasoned. He's getting a little better at it. In fact, Cotton messes up this time. It's the other way around. And Luke gets the last laugh in some respects. Cassiopeia is not in this novel. No, I know. But I hear it all the time. Here she is. She's like, see, I told you. It just didn't fit. She just didn't work in this one. It was Luke mainly I wanted to develop. Now, she's mentioned constantly, but I have to. She makes me mention her constantly. Those are-
You might tell.
Oh, this is Elizabeth, my wife. She is Cassiopeia, basically. So she takes a very serious interest in it. She guards Cassiopeia very much so, and so there has to be a reference every so many pages.
I didn't want them to think you were picking on some
No,
random customer.
she was, Elizabeth, when I created Cassiopeia and Templar, you know, they hated each other, Cotton. And I wasn't intending on that being anything. I mean,
Isn't it amazing how characters take over?
yeah, that was a one and out, is what that was basically. Because I wanted Cotton to play the field.
Right.
I didn't want him to be tied down, so I could create a new interest each time. It's fun for the novelist because you can create new things. It's fun for you because you get a whole new thing to deal with. But then she came along. That's about the time that Elizabeth came along, and then it changed.
So the whole John D. McDonald thing went away, right?
All went away at that point. And I broke them up at the end of Lincoln Myth. And I did. I broke them up. There's no question. I didn't tell her. I gave her the manuscript to read, and she came in and she threw that manuscript down on my desk. She says, "That's not happening. Whatever you've done, that's not happening." So I went one book, and then I brought her 14 Colonies. She came back, and I like her. Don't get me wrong. I love Cassiopeia. It's great. In fact, she could have her own book. She could basically just have her own everything. I mean, there's nothing. I don't have a problem with it. But from a novelist standpoint, you have to just look at it from a novelist standpoint. When you have two strong characters like that, you can't just have them both in every book. Otherwise, the books will be 500, 600, 800 pages long because you've got all this interaction and all this stuff. So just from a pure creative standpoint, it becomes a problem. And I can't assume that every reader who's reading the book knows about Cassiopeia and Cotton's relationship. In fact, I have to assume that they know nothing about that relationship. So you can see how it's difficult. That's why most characters in movies and TVs aren't attached. There's no attachment. And if they are, they get the attachment off pretty quickly. So they can have freedom of movement and keep the stories tight. Because in the writing business, shorter is always better. Always. You know, longer gets you nothing. Shorter is always a better story.
So that explains why Travis McGee had a new woman every book. And, if you look at most of the crime classics, they were single. Ross McDonald, Raymond Chandler, all those guys, they were not in serious relationships.
No, but it strangles you a little bit in your creativity because you're locked in each time. Where if you have a new character, you can just explore so many new things every time.
That's very true. But Elizabeth's actually smarter than you are because she could foresee the trend that
she
we are
did,
in
and
at the
she
moment.
was right.
Right?
You're right.
And at the moment, I think that you are in better shape having a strong woman character than not having one.
He always
And we
writes
didn't
strong
rehearse
women,
that, did we?
No.
No.
All my female characters are strong. I don't have any weak female characters ever. But what's happening is M.J. Rose and I are writing Cassiopeia novellas right now. Yeah, we did one last summer called the Museum of Mysteries, which is out there. You can download. And then this summer there'll be a new one called The Lake of Learning. So Cassiopeia is getting her own little novellas, which are her own adventure. Cotton's not there. He has not involved at all. So we're gonna try those for a little while and see how they work. We do those through Elizabeth's company, 1001 Dark Nights, and we put them out through there.
Sounds great. Now, we've had a small glitch with the back room. Patrick King, do we have any copies of Matchup out, or did we forget to bring them out?
There's a whole shelf.
Well, they aren't going to sell in the back, so here's a great idea. Why don't you bring them out front? And also, there is a book I was going to give away tonight that Julie has called Spies of No Country. So if you guys could retrieve that, that would be terrific. Let's talk. The reason I brought Matchup in is that it is this amazing story that Steve wrote. The International Thriller Writers Association does books of various kinds to raise money for ITW, and this one, the idea was to pair a guy and a woman and their characters, right? So Steve got Diana Gabaldon. So the first question that you should ask is, how the hell could he do this and with a time jump involved, right? And it was brilliant. It was absolutely
It was Diana's
brilliant.
idea. She was.
She's pretty brilliant too, right?
I can't write short stories. I'm terrible at it. She
No?
can. So she,
No, she can't.
well, she said she could. She told me she could.
Her idea for short stories like 40,000 words.
Well, we had a limit. You know, we had to keep it around 10,000 words is where we
Right.
were, and she did. She
did. This is the shortest short story she has
She
written.
wrote the first draft, and God bless her, she wrote it in first person with Cotton. So it was Cotton in her world.
Exactly.
So, you know, and I didn't tell her to do that. She just said, "I got it. I know what I know what I want to do." And she wrote her first draft, but she wrote it in third person. And then I got it, and Elizabeth read it, and we both came to the conclusion it would have been better in first person. So I rewrote it in first person past tense. Then somebody in this room thought it would be better in first person present tense. You. So I had to rewrite again. So I got to rewrite twice, and that makes
it improved with
it
every
did.
version.
It did. And first person present tense though was really weird for me because I use past tense verbs all the time. So we had to go through it constantly because my mind just automatically puts a past tense verb in. But it was Cotton going back through the stones, and he got to meet Jamie, and it happens in that 20-year period when Claire's not there. You know, when he's on his own. And it worked out well because you don't really know what he's doing in that 20-year period. She really has expanded. You get little snippets here and there, but you don't know everything. So we fit it in right there in that 20-year period there. And it's a fun little story. It's in Matchup, and that was done by the International Thriller Writers, and that's how you write. That's how we pay the bills.
Right, so Diana, to the best of my knowledge, has already signed them, and I can't remember if Steve has or not. Didn't you sign them 2 years ago?
I think I signed them when it came out 2 years ago.
Right,
Yeah.
so this is the very last of the first printing signed by both authors, so assuming we
Just
thank you.
deliver that.
Thank you. Assuming that you bring them, we brought them out of the back room, Julie? We did, look at that, isn't that exciting? So if you want to buy one.
And there's a whole bunch of other writers in there too we matched up, and there's some really interesting combinations that went on there. They're good little stories. And there's another one before that called Face Off.
Right.
That was done before, and it was 22 writers. We put them and we faced off their iconic characters with each other. Jim Rollins and I wrote a story together in that book.
We did, and wasn't it John Stanford and Jeffrey Deaver?
Yep,
And they wrote a really great, and I think it was a Nazi, right?
it's a good story.
Yeah, it's
a
been a
very
long
good
time
story.
since I read it, but it's another great World War. I've always thought that Jeffrey Deaver's best book was the one off he wrote about an American connected with the mafia who went to Germany. Trying to remember what it's called. I'm having a senior moment. Garden of the Beasts, I think, or is that Eric Larson? Something like the Garden of the Beasts. But anyway, it's really interesting in these short stories to see writers do stuff that they don't otherwise do. I can't believe somebody hasn't got a phone out by now to tell me what it is I can't remember. I can't really do it, but I rely on audience help now that I'm so senior, so there we are. Anyway, what else would you like
You want to take some questions?
We should do that.
Let's do that. Let's see what they have on their minds. What you got on your minds out there? Yes, sir, in the back.
I went to Malta about 10 years ago. The cathedral you mentioned is absolutely incredible. The artwork inside the cathedral features a lot of stuff by Caravaggio. Have you incorporated Caravaggio into this novel?
Just the room where the painting is. There's the largest Caravaggio in the world is there. And so there's a scene that takes place in that chapel where that's located. A critical scene of the novel takes place. So that's what I do a lot of times. If I can't incorporate the actual art into what I'm doing, I make it the background. So that when they're doing it around that. And it's huge. I mean, this painting must be 50, 60 feet wide, 50 feet tall. I mean, it's humongous.
It's very graphic.
Beautiful picture.
Wow.
Oh, it's
Caravaggio was a bad boy and died
Yes,
young.
he was.
So when was he?
He was in Malta, and he was there. He lived the last part of his life there in Malta. That's where
Is that where he died?
He came there and he stayed there in Malta, and he did that picture there. He created several chapels and several churches on the island. He worked with the Knights of Malta towards the end of his life. Yeah, but it looks like a photograph. I mean, it's how brilliant it is, but it fills up an entire wall up
And
there. It's
if I remember, it's the beheading of John the Baptist.
that's what it is. Exactly. There's a lot of blood and gore. Yeah, a lot of
A
blood
pretty
and gore.
graphic scene,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
All right,
Yeah.
another question.
Yes, question. Let me do her, and I'll come to you. Yes.
in the Bishop's Pond, you said that you were writing in first person for the first time. Will you continue to do that?
Probably try it again. I enjoyed writing first person. It was hard. It's the hardest way to write a novel. I wanted to do it and give it a shot. That was the perfect book to do it because it was a flashback book. I will say that my fans weren't as enthralled with it as I was because it was different because I normally do 3 or 4 or 5 points of view and 2 different stages, and it was one stage, and so they were like, you know, and I can respect that. I don't read a lot of first-person thrillers. I personally don't read a lot of first-person thrillers, which is a little weird, you know. I read them more now after I've written one because I can appreciate it a little bit more now and get into it. But when you condition a reader after 16 books, here's the way I do it, and then you change it, you're going to have some of that. But, you know, you don't want to do the same thing over and over again, man. It just drives me crazy. You know, I got to do something, you know, each book, I tried to do something in the book I've never done before. And that one was first person. And it was the shortest book I've ever written, 99,000 words. So it was the tightest story I ever wrote, too.
So you do it in part to keep yourself interested.
Exactly,
right?
because otherwise, if I don't do something new each book, it becomes kind of tedious. So it's a new challenge, something I've never done before. This book has something, I can't tell you what it is because it'll give away the surprise in the book, but it was tricky to do it to keep from lying to the reader. I had to be careful never to lie to you. You can't, one of the rules of writing is never lie to the reader. And there's a surprise in this novel about 3/4 of the way through that Elizabeth knew nothing about it. She read the manuscript. I caught her off guard. She's a very astute reader, and she didn't see it coming. I went out of my way and did not foreshadow it in any shape, form, or fashion. There's not one single hint that's coming in any way. And so that was the trick. Could I pull that? Could I do that? That was the one thing that I did in this novel. So be interesting to see. Unfortunately, the second review that comes in on Amazon, the second Amazon reviewer writes it up and says, "I saw that coming a mile away." I want to write. I hope they're not in the audience, but I want to write back so bad, and she won't let me. I've argued with Amazon. There should be an author reply button. And we should be allowed. We're the only ones that can use it. But I would have loved to have written back and said, please tell me the point where you figured it out, because I didn't even figure it out till 3/4 of the way through. I added it late and put it in, and I added it late because I'd never even thought about it beforehand. So there's nothing to foreshadow. So it's just, you know.
Did this reviewer reveal what it was?
No, thankfully they did not. No, thankfully they did not do that. He just said he saw the surprise coming a mile away. You could see it, and that's why he gave me 3 stars, because I saw it coming. And you want to say, "Come on!" My conscience is here. I want that author button so bad.
I actually had a moment. Stephen Hunter's book, The 47 Samurai, which is my favorite Stephen Hunter. I was reading along, and I came to something. And I stopped right there, and I wrote to Stephen, and I said, I am on page, whatever it was, 160 something or other, and here's what I think you're doing, and here's why I think you were doing it. He wrote back, bitch. But I was right, because if you've got a gun guy in Japan against a sword guy, how's it going to work? How's he going to win, right? And so there it was. You know, you
have to be if you give it enough hints. But I went out. The trick I was trying to do for